Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we are going to study the question bank of Karnataka First PUC Biology Chapter 11, Transport in Plants. Question number 1. What are the factors affecting the rate of diffusion? Answer. Factors affecting the rate of diffusion are gradient of concentration, permeability of membrane, temperature, pressure. Next question. What are porins? What role do they play in diffusion? Answer. The porins are proteins that form huge pores in the outer membranes of the plastids, mitochondria, and some bacteria, allowing molecules up to the size of small proteins to pass through. Thus, porins facilitate diffusion. Next question. Describe the role played by protein pumps during active transport in plants. Answer. In active transport, the movable carrier proteins are called pumps. They perform transport across the membrane against the concentration gradient by using ATP as energy. Next question. Explain why pure water has the maximum water potential. Answer. The water potential of pure water at normal temperature and pressure is zero. Due to the interaction of water molecules with the solute particle, the free energy of the water molecule decreased. In the solution value of water, the potential is always negative or less than zero. Thus, pure water has maximum water potential. Next question. Differentiate between the following: diffusion and osmosis, transpiration and evaporation, osmotic pressure and osmotic potential, inhibition and diffusion, apoplast and symplast pathways of absorption of water in guttation and transpiration. Answer. First, differences between diffusion and osmosis. Diffusion. The movement of the molecules of solids, liquids and gases from higher concentration to lower concentration is termed diffusion. Gaseous exchange through stomata occurs due to diffusion. Loss of water vapor from aerial parts involves the phenomenon of diffusion. Osmosis, the diffusion of water or any other liquid through a semi-permeable membrane into the solution having the same liquid as a solvent from higher concentration to lower concentration is termed osmosis. Water enters into root hairs of root by osmosis. Osmosis is of two types. Cell to cell movement of water through the plant body occurs through osmosis. Next, differences between transpiration and evaporation. Transpiration. It is water loss from the surface of living aerial parts of the plant. Water vapors are formed in the internal tissues of the plant. It involves living tissues. It is both a physical and physiological process. It is thus controlled by external environmental factors like relative humidity, temperature, availability of soil, etc., and internal or plant factor like position, number, opening and closing of stomata, the extent of the cuticle. It is regulated by the amount of available soil water. Next, evaporation. It is the loss of water from the free surface of the water. It does not involve living tissues. It is purely a physical process controlled by only environmental factors like relative humidity, temperature, wind velocity. It continues as long as the water is available on the surface. Next, differences between the osmotic pressure and osmotic potential. Osmotic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure required to stop the movement of water molecules through a semi-permeable membrane is called osmotic pressure. Osmotic potential. It is the amount by which the water potential of pure water is reduced, known as osmotic potential, by the presence of the solute. It is represented by bars and has a negative value. Next, differences between inhibition and diffusion. Imbibition is a special type of diffusion when water is absorbed by solids, collides, causing them to enormously increase in volume. The classical example of imbibition are absorption of water by seeds and By dry wood, inhibition is also diffusion. Since water movement is along a concentration gradient, the seeds and other such materials have almost no water, hence they absorb water easily. Diffusion. In diffusion, molecules move in a random fashion, the net result being substances moving from regions of higher concentration to regions of lower concentration. Diffusion is a slow process and is not dependent on a living system. Diffusion is obvious in gases and liquids, but diffusion in solid rather than solids is more likely. Diffusion is very important to plants since it is the only means of gaseous movement within the plant body. Next, differences between the apoplast and symplast pathways of absorption of water in plants. Apoplast. The apoplast is a system of adjacent cell wall that is continuous throughout the plant except at the Casparian strips of the endodermis in the roots. The apoplast movement of water occurs exclusively through the intercellular spaces and the walls of the cells. Movement through the apoplast does not involve crossing the cell membrane. This movement is dependent on the gradient. The apoplast does not provide any barrier to water movement, and water movement is through the mass flow. As water evaporates into the intercellular spaces or the atmosphere, tension develops in the continuous stream of water in the apoplast. Next is symplast. The symplastic system is the system of interconnected protoplast. Neighboring cells are connected through cytoplasmic strands that extend through plasmodesmata. During the symplastic movement, the water travels through the cells through their cytoplasm. Intercellular movement is through plasmodesmata. Water has to enter the cells through the cell membrane. Movement is again down a potential gradient. Symplastic movement may be aided by cytoplasmic streaming. The water then moves through the symplast and again crosses a membrane to reach the cells of the xylem. The movement of water through the root layers is ultimately symplastic in the endodermis. This is the only way water and other solutes can enter the vascular cylinder. Next, differences between gutations and transportation. Transportation. It occurs through the general surface, cuticles, stomata, and lenticles. The water is lost in the form of vapors during transpiration. It can occur through all aerial parts. It mainly occurs during the daytime only when the temperature is comparatively high. It takes place under dry conditions which favor water loss by diffusion. The bulk of transpiration occurs when stomata are open, as transpiration through lenticles and cuticle are insignificant. Under deficient water conditions, excessive transpiration may lead to wilting. It is regulated by a number of external and internal factors such as relative humidity, temperature, opening and closing of stomata, etc. Gutations. It occurs through hydatodes present at the vein ends. The water is lost in the form of droplets during guttation. It occurs in leaves only. It occurs during cold hours of the night. It takes place under conditions that retard water loss by diffusion. Example, high relative humidity and low temperature of the atmosphere. It takes place only under conditions of adequate water supply and during cold and humid weather as prevail at night or early morning, although Odious remains open all the time. It does not occur in deficient water conditions and thus never leads to wilting. It is mainly regulated by humidity, temperature, and availability of water in the soil. Answer. Typically, pure water at standard temperature and pressure is defined as having a water potential of 0. The addition of solutes to water lowers its potential, just an increase in pressure increases its potential. Seawater typically has negative water potentials relative to the pure water reference. If there is no restrictions on flow, water molecules will proceed from the focus of pure water to the the more negative water potential of the solution. Water potential of a cell is affected by both solute and pressure potential. The relationship between them is as follows. Next question. What happens when a pressure greater than the atmospheric pressure is applied to pure water or a solution? Answer. Under constant temperature, the volume of a liquid varies inversely to pressure. Moreover, if greater pressure is applied, then it will change the state of matter from liquid to solid at a given temperature. Any liquid will abide by these laws. Question number 8. With the help of well-labeled diagrams, describe the process of plasmolysis in plants, giving appropriate examples. Here is the diagram. Plasmolysis occurs when water moves out of the cell and the cell membrane of a plant cell shrinks away from its cell wall. This occurs when the cell is placed in a solution that is hypertonic to the protoplasm. Water moves out, it is first lost from the cytoplasm and then from the vacuole. The water, when drawn out of the cell through diffusion into the extracellular fluid, causes the protoplast to shrink away from the walls. The cell is said to be plasmolysed. Next, explain what will happen to a plant cell if it is kept in a solution having higher water potential. Answer. If a plant cell is placed in a hypotonic solution, the plant cell loses water and hence turgor pressure, making the plant cell flaccid. Plants with cells in its condition wilt. Further, water loss causes plasmolysis. Pressure decreases to the point where the protoplasm of the cell peels away from the cell wall, leaving gaps between the cell wall and the membrane. Eventually, cytolysis, the complete collapse of the wall, can occur. Next question. How is the mycorrhizal association helpful in the absorption of water and minerals in plants? Answer. In conifers, example pinus, the root hairs help in water absorption are either very poorly developed or entirely absent. Such roots are associated with fungal hyphae is called mycorrhiza. The fungal filaments form a network around the young roots. The hyphae have a very large surface area that absorbs mineral ions and water from the soil and hands over to root. Next question. What role does root pressure play in water movement in plants? Answer. As various ions from the soil are actively transported into the vascular tissues of the roots, water follows its potential gradient and increases the pressure inside the xylem. This positive pressure is called root pressure and can be responsible for pushing up water to small heights in the stem. Root pressure can at best only provide a modest push in the overall process of water transport. They obviously do not play a major role in water movement up tall trees. The greatest contribution of root pressure may be to re-establish the continuous chains of water molecules in the xylem, which often break under the enormous tension created by transpiration. Root pressure does not account for the majority of water transport. Most plants meet their need by transpiratory pull. Next question. Describe the transpiration pull model of water transport in plants. What are the factors influencing transpiration? How is it useful to plants? Answer. Despite plants not having a heart or a circulatory system, the flow of water upwards through the xylem can achieve fairly high rates, up to 15 meters per hour. How is this movement accomplished? A long-standing question is whether water is pushed or pulled through the plants. Most researchers agreed that water is mainly pulled through the plant, and that is driving force for this process is transpiration from the leaves. This is referred to as the cohesion, tension, transpiration pull model of water transport. But what generates this transpiration pull? Water is transient in plants. Less than 1% of water reaching the leaves is used in photosynthesis and plant growth. Most of it is lost through the stomata in the leaves. This water loss is transpiration. Transpiration is affected by several external factors: temperature, light, humidity, wind speed. Plant factors that affect transpiration include the number and distribution of stomata, percent of open stomata, water status of the plant, canopy structure, etc. Here is the diagram of that. Next question. Discuss the factors responsible for the ascent of xylem sap in plants. Answer. The transpiration driven ascent of xylem sap depends mainly on the following physical properties of water: cohesion, the mutual attraction between water molecules; adhesion, the attraction of water molecules to polar surface; surface tension, water molecules are attracted to each other in the liquid phase more than to water in the gas phase. Next question. What essential role does the rule endodermis play during mineral absorption in plants? Answer. Like all cells, the endodermis cells have many transport proteins embedded in their plasma membrane. They let some solutes cross the membrane but not others. Transport proteins of endodermal cells are control points where a plant adjusts the quantity and types of solutes that is absorbed from the soil. Note that the root endoderm, because of the layer of suberin, has the ability to actively transport ions in one direction only. The endodermis regulates the quantity and type of minerals and ions that reach the xylem. Next question. Explain why xylem transport is unidirectional and phloem transport bidirectional. Answer. Food, primarily sucrose, is transported by the vascular tissue phloem from a source to a sink. Usually the source is understood to be that part of the plant which synthesizes the food, and sink, the part that kneads or stores the food. But the source and sink may be reversed depending on the plant's need. Sugar stored in the roots may be mobilized to become a source of food in the early spring when the buds of trees act as a sink. They need energy for growth and development of the photosynthetic apparatus. Since the source sink relationship is variable, the direction of movement in the phloem can be bidirectional. This contrasts with that of the xylem, where the movement is always unidirectional. Next question. Explain the pressure flow hypothesis of translocation of sugars in plants. Answer. The accepted mechanism used for the translocation of sugars from source to sink is called the pressure flow hypothesis. As glucose is prepared at the source, it is converted to sucrose. The sugar is then moved in the form of sucrose into the companion cells and then into the living phloem sieve tubes cells by active transport. This process of loading at the source produces a hypertonic condition in the phloem. Water in the adjacent xylem moves into the phloem by osmosis. Here is the diagram for that. An osmotic pressure builds up, the phloem sap will move to areas of lower pressure. At the sink, osmotic pressure must be reduced. Again, active transport is necessary to move the sucrose out of the phloem sap and into the cells, which will use the sugar to convert it into energy, starch or cellulose. As sugars are removed, the osmotic pressure decreases and water moves out of the phloem. Next question. What causes the opening and closing of guard cells of stomata during transpiration? Answer. Normally, stomata are open in the day and closed during the night. The immediate cause of the opening or closing of the stomata is a change in the turgidity of the guard cells. The inner wall of each guard cell towards the pore or stoma is thick and elastic. When turgidity increases within the two guard cells flanking each stomata, the thin outer wall bulge out and force the inner walls into the crescent shape. So this is all about your lesson. If you want the notes of more lessons, check the playlist of my channel. Thank you.